Now to Washington, where it's now day 3 of the government shutdown. Today, the Senate will once again hold votes to try and reopen the government, but the hope that they will be able to do so is very minimal. Meanwhile, Democrats and Republicans continue to spar on Capitol Hill.
We are not asking Democrats to swallow a list of new Republican policies or partisan demands. Not in there. We are asking Democrats to do nothing more than pass a clean, nonpartisan bill to fund the government for a few more weeks.
Donald Trump and Republicans have made clear they wanted to shut down the government. They want to inflict pain on the American people. They continue to engage in their retribution efforts.
CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion is on Capitol Hill. So, Nikole, what's the sense of how today's vote will go? We sort of teased it, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see how things play out. Keep in mind, these are procedural votes or test votes just to give us a sense if there's an appetite to move either of these funding bills forward. Keep in mind, the Senate strategy here has been to put forth a Democratic alternative, which has typically failed. And then, of course, the bill that passed the House last month, which was mostly backed by Republicans, which continues to fail. That bill, of course, provides a clean extension of government funding. And that's what Senate leadership is calling for, as far as Democrats to try to fall in line and cross over to back this bill to reopen the government. While we have seen a few Democrats peel off, we'll be watching today to see if others follow suit. But Leader Schumer has insisted that his caucus remains unified and that in order to get Democratic votes, Republican leaders are going to have to come to the table to address this critical issue of health care.
So, Nikole, what if these votes fail? I mean, we're on a Friday. Is there any chance of the Senate working through the weekend?
Well, Leader Thune has indicated that is unlikely at this point. So, we expect that if these votes fail, that the Senate would likely try to take this up again on Monday. We're also expecting the House to be back in session next week. So, again, that seems like the next best opportunity for lawmakers to make another attempt.
All right, Nikole Killion for us, watching all the action or the lack of action on Capitol Hill for us this morning. Thank you. This morning, we were supposed to have a new September jobs report, but the government shutdown has delayed that data and other important releases indefinitely. So far, it's had very little impact on Wall Street, but that could change the longer the shutdown goes on. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady is joining us live at the New York Stock Exchange this morning. So, Kelly, we don't have the September jobs report, which perhaps is a blessing for the Trump administration, given how things have been going the last couple of weeks. But we do have some new numbers on layoffs this year. What's the latest?
Yeah, I'm at the New York Stock Exchange. Normally a jobs report day, there's a lot more activity, but it's definitely much more mild than usual. But the Fed is going to be looking at a lot of other different reports, and one that you mentioned, right? So the Challenger report, they look at hiring and layoffs every single month. It's not a report that gets a ton of attention, but because we don't have today's important jobs report, a lot more eyeballs on this. And two stats really stuck out to me, Vlad. One is that the layoffs that we have seen year to date here, okay, were about 900,000, 950,000. That's the biggest amount of layoffs that we have seen, according to this report, since 2020. Now, I don't want to say anything that they are at the levels of 2020, because, of course, right at the beginning of the pandemic, there was just a mass culling of the workforce given the circumstances. But that comparison, going back to the pandemic, I think that really stood out to me. The other stat that stood out to me is that the year-to-date hiring on the flip side is the lowest that we have seen since going back to the end of the Great Recession. And so the Fed will look at different reports like this, weigh at that next interest rate decision, what is the bigger problem? Is it the weakening in the labor market, or is it rising prices? But given the limited data, it's going to be a little bit of a dance for them.
Yeah. So let's talk about the growing concerns about this impact and the impact of this shutdown. First, the president's tariffs on the housing crisis here in the U.S. and, of course, what happens when people are unable to pay their bills the longer this shutdown goes on.
So the housing crisis is an interesting one, because if you have a federal-backed mortgage, or you're applying for a federal-backed mortgage, and you live in a particular area that is often impacted by flooding or hurricanes, you are required to get put in an application to the National Flood Insurance Program. And right now, because the government is shut down, That is not happening. And the estimate that I saw is roughly 1,300 or so of these applications would be impacted per day. And so you think about people who are looking to buy homes, people who are looking to sell homes, but are sort of seeing the situation, they might just say, hey, I'm going to wait for a little bit, which goes back to impacting the supply and demand issues that we're dealing in the housing crisis. In terms of the length, if you are applying for a federal mortgage and you're not involved in one of those areas where you would need the flood insurance, you might also see delays. But Vlad, we also have some tariffs that are going to go into effect in about a week and a half or so. Wood, furniture, things that when you are constructing a home, kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, could drive up the prices. And so as we see people struggle to get that first home because they do feel like prices have been rising, and they're right, that could play into it. You also mentioned when people aren't paying their bills, right? We know that there's a two-speed economy going on if you have a federal worker who is in that lower income bracket. And even if they're going to get that back pay, eventually when the government reopens, it's a really, really tough situation. Have to dip into their savings.
Yeah, for sure. Kelly O'Grady on a Friday for us. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it.